We're all just filing into the room here, and so we'll get going in just a second. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being on time. Okay, let's do this. Hey everyone, and welcome to today's MSA webinar. How does a music festival become sustainable? This is one in a quarterly series we call The Green Room. I'm Joel McCower, Strategy Director at MSA, as well as Chairman and co-founder of Trellis Group, which some of you may still know by its former name, GreenBiz. MSA, of course, is the Music Sustainability Alliance, an industry consortium where industry stakeholders innovate, learn, and collaborate to accelerate a sustainable future. As you can see on the screen, we provide community science-based solutions, resources, best practices, and tools to create a culture where sustainability is the norm, not the exception. Before we begin the program, a few housekeeping details. First, this is being recorded, and the recording will be available to review or share. A link will be sent to all registered participants within the next 24 hours. Second, you'll find the chat button at the bottom of your screen. Clicking on that opens up the chat box. Feel free to introduce yourself and say where you're dialing in from. Chat function is also where we'll be fielding your questions, which we'll get to a little bit later on, but which you can feel free to ask at any time. So with that, let's get going. How does a music festival integrate sustainability into its DNA? Well, it's not easy. You've got tens of thousands of fans driving or even flying to and from a venue. They may be camping in tents, campers, and cars, or cooking or eating on the site, maybe even shuttling back and forth from a hotel. There are the impacts of food and beverage they consume, and then there's the venue itself, how it's powered, the waste it generates, the impacts on the land and local ecosystems and the community. Given all this, what does it take to make a festival embrace sustainability? That's today's topic. Joining me are three leaders showing the way. Sam Booth is Sustainability Director for AEG Europe, where they oversee the LIDO Festival. We'll talk about that in a bit. Zale Schoenborn is the founder and CEO of Pickathon, which does appropriately the Pickathon Festival. And Steve Szymanski is co-founder and owner of Planet Bluegrass, which has the Telluride Bluegrass Festival, among others. Welcome, gentlemen. Before we learn about each of your events, I want to start with sort of a big picture question for each of you. If you could redesign an event from scratch, a festival model from scratch, what would a truly sustainable festival look like? Steve, let's start with you.
Okay, how about a big question for the get going?
Yeah.
We did not really have a clue about a sustainable festival at first because we really didn't know what we were doing when we started way back in 1989. So, knowing what I know now, it would definitely be a conversation in the community because we obviously exist in different communities with our festivals, looking at our impacts to that community and how best to mitigate them with what we have locally to work with, and I think it would take some time, well worth spent probably, a significant amount of time to really address as much of it as we could in advance and have buy-in from all the entities, and I think that would really be a great starting point to introduce a festival.
Well, that's interesting. Most people would list a number of different attributes or programs or initiatives within a festival. You're talking about community engagement as the beginning point to really understand the impacts and deal with them. That's great. Zale, how about you? You're not
Steve.
here.
Oh,
There we go.
can you hear me?
Yep.
I would agree, Steve. There's kind of the classic environmental sustainability, and But I think even more important is that kind of like community sustainability, where environmental is part of it, and how we're in the middle of a neighbor, kind of a suburbia out there growing outside of Portland, and how do we kind of sustainably benefit the community is kind of one of the ways we look at it. Environmental is a big part of that, but also just culturally, like what do we do with the neighborhood schools? What do we do with the trades, with the with the university? How that's becoming kind of like a big part of sustainability for us is like thinking how we are making the region a better place, just not just environmentally, but also just from workforce, what footprint do we leave? We like to leave lasting legacies from everything we build. We upcycle them back into the community, things like that.
Again, a community focus as opposed to an environment focus. That's pretty interesting. Um, Sam.
I'll take the environment one. Although community is also super important for us, all of our festivals are city centre parks. So obviously you can imagine that comes with plenty of challenges with regards to dealing with local noise complaints, making sure you leave the park in a good state for the community and engage the community throughout. But I guess my answer to this question might vary depending on whether we're creating a sustainable, quote unquote, sustainable festival today or one in maybe 30 years or so. Because in 30 years or so, you would hope that the systems that we currently exist in will have been fixed or at least substantially changed, which might mean that in 30 years you could go to a festival and sustainably eat a burger, for example, or you might be able to even fly there. But today, I'd say what a truly sustainable event would look like would require you to really upskill everyone in public transport. That would be a huge part of it. You would have to completely relook at how you power everything, from introducing batteries and renewable power through to newer technologies like hydrogen. You will also need to look at reducing meat intake across your entire system. You'll need to look at trying to really improve your recycling rates as high as they can be. And all these things are extremely difficult and in some ways the antithesis of how events have run really to date. People are quite used to picking things up, getting them done quickly, and then binning them very quickly at the end of it as well. So that again may be possible 30 years from now if we really look at the systems and the broader like framework in which we operate. But at the moment, we have to really kind of challenge those assumptions and really look at them from a different angle.
Yeah, all of this stuff is challenging, and I hope that when we can talk about this, that the timeline is a lot shorter than what you're talking about, some years and instead of decades. Let's start with talking about energy and power, how we power festivals. You mentioned that, Sam. So let's again stick with you for a second. What are you finding is possible in terms of the ability to first of all, you're doing most of your festivals in urban areas, in local parks, so you're not out in a remote area or a greenfield. You're, but so that may have some advantages. But how are you powering them now in a way that is introducing renewable power, batteries, or any other systems?
So it's changing very quickly, I would say. I think in just the last year, we've seen a real step change in what looks good and what kind of the gold standard is. I think we can all probably agree that the nirvana for a sustainable festival would be being able to hook it up to the grid, and making sure that that power can be drawn cleanly and safely straight from a national grid source. And that is starting to happen. So in the city centre parks that we operate in, we this year managed to upgrade the connection that we had, which was a very limited connection that had been installed for film crews, essentially. We managed to work with the local council, the UK Power Network, the supplier of the electricity to that particular plug, I'll call it, our production teams, our power teams, all of our trading teams. We even managed to get the London Mayor involved at some point and kind of triangulate between all those different people to supercharge that grid connection to a state that we could then live charge a mega battery, a 1 megawatt battery on site, which could then basically power our entire VIP area, the main stage, and another chunk of the festival traders, all from one battery and one grid connection, which was a real step change um, in terms of what we've been able to do before. It caused a lot of headaches, a lot of stress, a lot of very skeptical people came into that conversation right at the very beginning, and they all left, I'm very happy to say, thrilled basically by the results they'd seen and how quickly and successfully that battery power system had been able to be introduced and working in such a way that everyone was just really, really happy about it. The air quality was better, the sound quality was even better. And we were just super excited to see how that case study, now that so many different teams have worked on it and the brain power that's been expanded on that, can now kind of be start rolling out and help some of our other festivals, but also other festivals that work either in city centre parks or further afield.
You said there are a lot of headaches, but people left happy. Talk a little bit about some of those headaches, and or one, just pick one, and how you made everybody happy.
So I guess the only example I know of this working before in the UK anyway, was just basically picking up a battery, dropping it to the festival site, and playing the main stage off that battery. Um, because that's new. Again, even that caused problems, but this time we were trying to be quite clever in terms of simultaneously charging the battery from the grid at the same time as you were powering the stage. And I don't want to get into the real specifics of it, but essentially the size of the battery and the size of the power draw kept tripping the grid connection, and we had to basically get the mayor involved to override some slightly small-minded people who wouldn't let us push that grid connection as far as we could. The mayor did get involved, and we were very thankful for that, because actually what then did happen is that we could really push that and prove the point that actually this was doable. Obviously, as you could imagine, this was all happening about 48 hours before doors. We were doing sound checks, everyone was very stressed. But as I said, now that that muscle memory exists, now that people know that quirk of the system, next year we'll be able to do it much quicker, much easier, and those same teams can go to other festival sites, work for other clients, and take that knowledge with them. So we're really thrilled with how that's gone.
The politics of power. I love it. Zale, you've been nodding with a lot of this of what Sam's been talking about. What's been your experience with powering renewably?
Well, we started a long time ago with solar power, and we woefully were underpowered in terms of like being able to store it all weekend. So we went to some distributed solars on our barns and offset power over the year. That was kind of our next version of this. Biodiesel, various sustainable, biodiesel sources. The one I think had the most promise for us, and we were the first American festival to do it, was a hydrogen generator that we prototyped with the Toyota Racing Division. And I think, a couple years later, that might actually be ready if it wasn't so expensive. And we are in a greenfield. We don't have the ability to hook into kind of municipal power here. Batteries is another source. We would love to explore that at scale, but I really feel like you gotta be charging those things kind of continuously. So the hydrogen though really was a good experience. It was a little bit new, but I think there's a lot of promise there for festivals, because draw on the festival side is a lot higher on the stages, even with LED lights. Power of just a large professional stage is pretty serious. And then add in a refrigerator. Those are like, there's a whole nother level of power.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk a little bit about why hydrogen versus some other renewable fuels, including renewable natural gas, biodiesel. Why did you pick hydrogen? Because as you said, it is expensive. And what was it? Was it powering a fuel cell, or what was the hydrogen actually
Yeah,
powering?
it was a first portable fuel cell generator. And it was a demonstration project. They were using it in the racing world, and we reached out. We're like, how about doing this in the festival world? Like this is because the output power there, it looks like a fuel, like a normal generator. It can hold 60 kW, 120 kW kind of power sources, and you don't you're not going to run out. As long as you have hydrogen, it has very steady, clean power. And where you have to very much engineer the battery system so that you have the ability to recharge them. It's very hard. The kind of peak powers that you pull, especially on some things like big refrigerator trucks and stuff, those are difficult even for hydrogen generators. So it's like the corner cases are really where like hydrogen behaves a lot more like a regular fuel generator. So it's just easier to take all the systems and not have to modify and really consider how you're going to adapt your stage, your lights, your refrigeration, and this and that.
Literally plug and play. Steve, you've been doing this longer than most. What's been your experience with renewable, and what's sort of where are you now compared to where you started a few years ago?
Well, now we're feeling better about relying on the grid. As Sam said, there's been so many changes in Colorado. We've been kind of ahead of the curve with our mandates, and we work with a couple different, power companies, but both, again, due to community pressure and proactive efforts, which I just have helped move the needle. But back in the day, we did kind of go through the biodiesel when we were running diesel trucks. Obviously, electric trucks now are, our go-tos, that we didn't have to figure that out. We had a solar second stage for years, but it was a grid tie system. So again, could supply very little power. We couldn't really have a big stage running off it. But yeah, Telluride, again, we're up against being in a very remote high alpine area. And so the power sources were really pretty lame back in the day. We would have concerts where the power would go out and we would actually be, no lights on the stage, and we're still like running some music, being able to, have audio, which doesn't take much power, but some crazy stuff. So we had generator backups for years. And now Telluride, we have much more reliable power in town. And obviously those issues are, but it really was more like, okay, we're going to be able to successfully get through the festival each year with decent, sound, power, lights, all that, but so yeah, so the grid's coming along. We got wind, we got, solar, and I think that is really where we all need to get to, because it makes a lot more sense, given the expenses and the logistics of trying to do all these other things to patchwork it together for a major festival. If you're in an urban area, much different situation, perhaps, but we're kind of limited at what we can do, especially in Telluride.
Yeah, lots of great comments in the chat from Neil Vasavada from Overdrive around energy. Some of them are fairly geeky, and we won't get into necessarily talking about them now, but I encourage everyone to check some of those out. One of the other big obvious impacts that at least the fans see most is waste. There's so much, and so much of that is plastic, so much of that is single use. I'm wondering what each of you are doing and thinking about, and also maybe what you've tried that hasn't worked out as well as you might have hoped, as it relates to waste. Steve, we'll start with you this time.
Okay, well, we're 23 years in, and we've done a lot of things. But again, if I look at really what the turning points were, for us, one, we had about 12 years under our belts running festivals. So we kind of figured that part out, and we had a little extra time and bandwidth to look at other things. But again, two, we happened to get a new beer sponsor by the name of New Belgian Brewing. Some of you folks might have heard of them, but
That tire beer.
that tire mom and pop organization, they came at it, their whole company was based on sustainability right from the start, which was cool. And I didn't know any companies back then that even, were thinking about that from day one. And it was also to have fun in what they were doing. And they basically were mentors for us for the first few years to get us on track. And they shared really open books with what they were doing. And so they had a sustainability goddess was her title. And she basically said, I'm yours. Let's do it, And so we were able to kind of jump into really one of the hardest parts is just the assessment of what are your impacts in a community like Telluride. And let me tell you, you'll come up with 5 pages of line items of all the impacts of a festival in a community. And having the help with that, and then having the ability to kind of sort through and really start, okay, where do we start on this, and it just so happened that we had been recycling beer cups and things like that, but we had a local person who had a farm 16 miles out of town who was willing to take compost from the festival. And back then, there was no certification on it. It was commercial facilities. It was a farm. They had space. And so we started composting like 2003 for, 12,000 people.
Is
Only,
this mostly food, or are we also composting cups and plates and things like that?
yes, cups. We've started, again, this is where the whole compostable, just trying to find compostable items back then was a nightmare, but there was one company in this country that was making them. And so, yeah, we were taking our cups, we're taking our plate, all the compostables that we had at the time. And I can't remember if everything, they had utensils then, they might have, but, we were just piling all this stuff, going up to her farm, big pile, she'd cover it up and would compost it for us for the first few years. And so that got us really going into waste reduction right away. We were, reducing massive amount of waste. 2024, we just got our designation from a greener, festival, and they basically we came up, I think, 73% diversion, which is amazing given a place like Telluride, which is so hard to really have the resources to do that kind of stuff. So that's one of our better diversion rates. But when you think about all the impacts, we have 3,700 campers. That's always been kind of the weak link because you can't really search every camper. What are you bringing into our event? And you can't, also can't really make them do anything. They're in the campgrounds, and we set up, with our ambassadors and help people, sort through their stuff. But at the end of the day, that's a really hard place for us to control,
Sure.
the situation. But as far as the festival grounds go, we're like 90%, 95%, gets diverted. And it's been a major amount of learning and processes. We use a lot of incentives, obviously, to get people to change their behavior, because all of us are coming and they have to learn how to exist in our little world, right? Which is a festival, which, and a good question is, what is a festival? We can get to that later, because it varies so greatly as to what people think festivals even are or should be, but
What do you mean? I mean, a festival is usually a multi-day, or I guess it can be a one day outside, usually people showing up. But what are some of the different definitions?
well, no, I just think the vision of what a festival is. We've all been to many festivals, and you walk through that door, and like for me, in like 2 minutes, I really start to understand, what is this about? What are their priorities and what's kind of, going on? And I just think it's a huge, huge, big, diverse thing, because some people, it's just about the music, really, and you get food here and listen to music, and I think for other people, it's much more about the community interaction
Okay.
and how do we all give back and help and work together, and just bigger things that can happen. It's a culture, it's basically a culture for a lot of people. For other people, it's not. It's like, we're going to make money doing a festival, and how do we increase our bottom line, and those are easy to really see right away, when it's all about the money.
So,
Um,
so
oh,
Zale, heard a bit about waste reduction, heard a little bit about culture. Feel free to weigh in on those. But I'm wondering about reusables. Haven't heard anything about how do we eliminate the trash in the first place through reuse. Any experience there that you can share?
Yeah, we going through similar issues to Steve. There wasn't great compostable cups back in 2009. So we were going through plastic cups, and even a festival like us, it was obscene. It was over 100,000 cups in a weekend. And as much as we were recycling them, there was also, water was a big issue, was a big money maker. How do you, bottled water we felt really strongly like water should be free because it's summer, it's crime to like charge for water. And then we didn't want to, so we kind of put all that together. We worked with a company at the time out of California called Clean Canteen, and we prototyped with Sierra Nevada because they were partners with them.
A brewery you're
A,
talking about.
yeah, a steel cup that was 16. It was a little over 16 ounces. You see them everywhere now. They're copied like in mass. They are this like and a silicone ring that you could have a D ring and clip it to your belt. And then so we said we're gonna get rid of all plastic. No cups, no plastic. We're gonna have compostable plates. This was 2010. And we decided that was the big thing there, which I will say to everyone is this shouldn't be an optional thing. They will fail immediately if you think that I'll give folks the option. And that's where a lot of folks who've gone off have failed on this. But the steel cups pay for themselves. People pay for them. There's a premium on them. There's literally no trash. We've kind of worked with all municipalities, and steel is very, you just wash it out with water, reuse it again, and it works like a champion. And they're the best camping cups that ever, I mean, you'll see them all over the West Coast. People have these cups from Pickathon. 2011, being Portland, we got just hammered on our compostable plates. They're like, you guys are lying to yourself. These are not really getting composted. And they proved to us that the trash of the composting was really just going to the trash at that time. It wasn't a great, so we got really into that. And we said, okay, well, what happens? How do we actually do washable plates and go to no single use items, which is kind of how do you minimize that? Like, don't have anything you can throw away. So in 2011, we did that.
Are you setting up your own washing facilities, or how do those get cleaned and set up for
Again,
reuse?
yeah, I mean, it's not an optional thing. You can bring your own plate. We have kind of self-washed, which is probably less than 5% but we have engineered a low flow farm centric where we can do, biofilter the water and kind of, dispose of it. We don't use any kind of toxins there. So yeah, we have big major industrial like kitchen on site that is just for dishwashing. And we used to have multiple plates, but now we have these I can actually grab a 9-inch pasta bowl. It's the perfect plate, and a bamboo kind of spoon fork. So spoon on one side, fork on the other. That's it. You can serve anything in the entire universe from that, from soups to ice cream to sandwiches to whatever. And that's what we do. And the system's very simple. You come to the festival, you buy a token because carrying cups one thing, carrying a plate and silverware is another. You take the token to a vendor, they give you your food on this plate, on this bowl. You give the bowl back to the dishwashing, they give you back a token. When you're leaving the festival, you give your token to the dishwashing and they give you the plate to take home. So it's like a souvenir. And so again, there's value in the system to them. It's like a merchandise thing. And that all plays for the entire system too. So it's all closed loop. And so I'd say the getting rid of plastic was about a third of our trash went down immediately. And then getting rid of the compostable plates and cups and everything else was another third. So we went about 2/3 over 2 years.
Wow. Um, Really interesting. So Sam, how about at your festival? What are you doing around waste and disposables, compostables, recyclables, reuse?
Yeah, well, I mean, Joel, you also mentioned things that hadn't gone well in the past, and I think up until this year, we'd often relied maybe a bit too much on the fan and the fan being engaged with the process, especially when you have 45,000 people who are all various levels of inebriated. Even with the best signage in the world, it's quite difficult sometimes to get them to abide by the rules. So the kind of attitude we took this year was to try and take as much of that choice and responsibility away from the fan and look after it ourselves. We reduced our waste streams front of house down to just two. So we had cans, which is canned beer, ready to drink cocktails, canned wine, and compostables. And those are the only two waste streams front of house. So obviously all of our trader serveware, cutlery, serviettes, everything were compostable. And then back of house, we had reusables. We felt like we could trust our staff and our crew to be a bit more responsible potentially. So all of our crew catering was on proper plates with proper cutlery. Everyone was told to bring reusable water bottles, etc., which helped really drive down the volume of waste that we were producing. And we had people, front of house staff going around educating people on cans and how recyclable cans are and how infinitely useful they can be. We also had back of house this thing called the baling machine, which we love. And essentially that crushes down all of our waste streams into very neat, tidy kind of bales, essentially. So we had, if you've all seen the film Wall-E, basically we had a little canned version of those. So 450 cans would be crushed down to a box about this big, which really reduced down our trucking. So obviously if you crush down waste into a small volume, you don't need to have as many trucks coming on site, taking skips away, etc., which that was really amazing from a kind of trucking perspective, but also from a emissions perspective. And we also had a back of house waste sorting table as well. So we had some poor souls going through each of the bins and making sure that even though we had reduced the waste streams front of house, back of house, they were kind of really going through this and making sure they were as clean as they could possibly be. And we were really thrilled actually with the results. We hit a 90% recycling rate across that festival, which I think is pretty unheard of for any of our UK or European festivals anyway. And it kind of set quite a high bar for us to beat this year, but we're already looking at ways that we can try and do that in terms of trying to bring in some reusables front of house, see if we can trial that maybe in the VIP area to start off with, and then kind of expand that out from there. There's a lot of very new technologies coming to the market, especially in the UK at the moment, which
So,
automatically refund people's deposits when they return them to a certain bin. So that kind of gets over a hurdle, which has long been a problem here.
forgive me if I missed this, but you mentioned two waste streams are reusable and compostable, or recyclable and compostable. I think they were. There's got to be some other waste that doesn't fit into one of those, just normal old waste that somehow gets into the mix. What happens there?
Yeah, so there's a small amount of general waste. I mean, obviously, well, I say obviously, but we had vape bins. I think vaping and smoking is a much bigger issue over here than it is in the US, from what I hear from my colleagues over there. Um, so we've got vape bins which sit alongside those ones, but they're much reduced now because disposable vapes have been banned in the UK, which is great. Um, but yeah, the small amount of general waste that did come in, because again, we have searches as people come into the festival, which actually removes a lot of that general waste actually. So people aren't really allowed to bring an awful lot into the festival with them. So really, in terms of stuff that you can get at the festival, it really is only cans and compostables, which is the vast majority of the waste. Any general waste that does go into those bins is picked up by the back of house waste sorting table. So they kind of manage to fish those last little bits out. If there's a sandwich box, for example, or someone brings in a plastic water bottle from outside. But apart from that, the only two things you can get inside the festival are cans and compostables.
Yeah. Somebody's asked, what's the typical, this is for any of you, what is the typical method of disposal at concerts? I assume that's for non-recyclable, non-reusable waste. She says, I envision a lot of material gets sent to waste to energy incineration. I'm guessing the answer to the question is going to be pretty location specific based on what's available, what the typical mode is in any one area. But Steve, Sam, Zale, any thoughts on the typical best use of best disposition of that waste?
So we definitely have waste because we have campers. So like Steve would camping festivals, we build ours is not like your typical day in and a day out festival. It is like a full blown city, like everything. We have all municipalities, we have huge medical staff, huge security, like we literally are running a city And so in building that city, you generate a lot of, a lot of materials are used, right? And so a lot of those campers, the places where we've had the biggest impact, we really, the campers is hard to control. We work all the time trying to like give them, I love the idea I saw on this comments of giving an award for the best camping. The thing that's really starting to really take off for us, and I think is actually has a lot of legs, is all the things you build for a festival. So we, like I said, we work with the community and architects and builders, and we're one of the largest kind of ephemeral architecture festivals in America. And so every one of our 12 stages is actually kind of a piece of artwork, like a large scale, massive, think Burning Man, but in the Oregon forests, and think like kind of renowned architects and builders. But we try to then take all that stuff and we, from the start, are thinking about what is the upcycle with this. So we try to think of our waste streams as actually a resource that we can kind of then make a lasting legacy in the community. That's where I see a lot of our waste going over. We're kind of babies at it. We're doing pretty good, but there's like so much more we can do. We've had some of our 15 teams have built bike shelters for and tables for kind of day use for homeless folks here, tiny homes, lots of cool projects. So upcycling, let me just put it in one word, upcycling your waste as much as possible.
Yeah. Steve, any thoughts?
Yeah, there's definitely waste. I think the camping impacts are always we're always trying to reuse, excuse me. The campers, if they're leaving things, I mean, we occasionally have snow at the festival. And that's always our most challenging times because then the camps don't get broken down properly. And we end up spending days trying to get all this stuff sorted out so we can get it to the right people to reuse and refurbish and do all kinds of things. But, we have sampled in some upcycling. It sounds like, Zale's really, they're committed to, a path that way. But it's as far as the future on that, I mean, I think it's really a question of what you can provide for the city you're building so that people don't have to bring all this extra stuff. And, at this point, we have about 4 or 5 campgrounds all around the county in different forests and different things. So it's again, it's a unique situation that we're dealing with. And so we need to, we're looking for ideas on all that.
Yeah. Well, I want to keep moving because there's so many topics to talk about. I want to talk about fan travel, which research has shown is the biggest sustainability impact, environmental impact of a festival, is just how people get to and from that, and particularly if they're not in city centers. Now, Sam, yours are located more in local parks. So, but even that, I'm sure that there's just transit issues and local traffic issues that you need to deal with. So let's start with you. But how are you dealing with fan travel?
It's almost an impossible topic sometimes, even when you live in a city like London, which is very blessed with some of the best public transport systems in the world. People still are very keen on their cars. They're keen on driving. If I take the example of one of our arenas, for example, I know it's not a festival, but it has similar issues when it comes to this. We still get about 30% of people coming to a gig in a car, which to me kind of blows my mind because the amount of time it must take for them to get out of the car park is insane compared to just hopping on the tube. And you can even get the ferry if you wanted to from the O2 into central London. So if you struggle to get them out of their car, even when you have that number of public transport services, it suggests to me that they're pretty tied to that. And when we've asked the question, sometimes it can be everything from convenience through to safety. And there's a lingering COVID effect in there as well. People feel like they're more attached to their cars now because they feel they can protect themselves a little bit. How we've tackled that at the O2, or we're trying to address it in some way. We now add a carbon tax to our car park. So everyone who does drive has to pay a little fee, which goes into a pot of money for the arena to initiate proper decarbonization initiatives, whether that be looking at electrifying our kitchens to looking at what we're doing for biodiversity on site. At least there is some kind of fund which is generated by that negative impact. And I know that at a lot of festivals in the UK, people do get early tickets if they also buy a coach ticket to that particular festival. Glastonbury, by far our biggest festival, those tickets, as in the coach and festival tickets, come out a week before. They give people another opportunity to get those tickets, and you only then get your ticket for the festival once you have got on that coach. So it really does force people to kind of go down that route. And they're doing a lot of work there to try and move. I think it's almost 200,000 people to a field in the middle of nowhere, which is obviously a huge logistical task. But they're really focused on that and driving it down. But it is, to be honest, a very, very difficult issue. I think we just have to try and position ourselves in the best way we can to either to facilitate best travel options when and where you can, whether that's giving people perks for coming by public transport or penalizing people who travel in the most polluting way possible. I think those are both options that have to be on the table and things that we have to consider, because ultimately it is by far the biggest issue.
Yeah, making the drivers park a good hike away from everybody else is one disincentive, I would imagine. Steve, how are you managing to get people in and out of the forest?
The thing that we discovered early on was, we got centered around, okay, electricity, how do we like offset our electrical and, the power? And then there were a bunch of, festivals out there. Hey, we're net zero. We've offset all the lights and power at the festival. And then you do a little deeper digging and you realize that over 90% of the impact of our festival is travel, as you said, because guess what? I think there's 20 countries and people from 50 states come to Telluride Bluegrass Festival, and it's an enormous impact. And so, the carbon offsets, the carbon issues really were the meat of kind of what we discovered and had to deal with and tried to deal with, given the voluntary actions we could take at the time, which, still remain a large part. Unfortunately, the best solution is still carbon offsets with some articulation about how you go about, finding those. And we can get into that if people are interested. But yeah, so that's the impact. And Telluride, if we wanted to really eliminate majority of our impact, it would be, we have experiment with buses and trying to, bus people from the Front Range and different things. But that is one of those situations for us is, we have to get really
Yeah.
think out of the box. We definitely do contests with carpooling and lots of incentives as well. And I think those are just things you have to just build into the whole system to get people to think about, okay, if I take 4 people, I get entered to win tickets or whatever it is, to the festivals. And then you have to manage that, and so it's a lot of complicated logistics.
Yeah, Zale, I think you're the one that's actually in the forest. So I think I got that wrong. But so
He
how are you
is in
managing?
we're on the edge of the city, so we are kind of like 12 miles from downtown, and the light rail is about 4.5 miles away. And biking and bike trails are, they're not great out where we are, but they're great in Portland. We basically have a similar issue. People travel from all over the 50 states and all over the world come. So that's kind of hard. But in actually at the festival, the main way we do it is we incentive price. We really push the car as the most expensive option. So you want to bring a car, great. But you want to bring a bike, free. We'll set you up. You're parked literally at the front gate. You got no busing, no nothing, and you can even bring your bikes into the campground. So it's like we really make bike is a big issue. Rideshare, about 15% of our people are coming through Lyft and Uber with people, and those are almost always carpools. We notice like 2-3 people per car is kind of our average on those.
Is there an
Um,
incentive for that?
right? You get to go at the front gate.
That
Again,
you don't have to park. So yeah.
And then shuttle buses. So we have a shuttle bus that connects that last gap from 4.5 miles away at the light rail. And we drive every 30 minutes. We'll pick up people there. And then, we do have cars, and you can bring them, but again, those are the most expensive options. And so over time, I think biking will become even more. Bikes is still a little bit rough to get out to where we are. But if that was really great, if there was public bus right to our door, that would make a huge difference. And eventually that will happen too. We're at kind of the edge of like where it's all developing.
Yeah.
So just
So
I'd say
maybe,
incentive pricing.
yeah, I mean, the incentives for carpooling, I think, are interesting. You've mentioned them a little bit, all of you. Any particular ones that have really uh, just worked?
We've found that basically creating kind of carpooling boards, like working with, and it's that that's changed so much over time. Like, what is a carpooling board? People, because cars are expensive, that's your best way to incentivize people carpooling. But you have to kind of find a way for the community to find each other. So, um, I want to even rethink that again. Like a lot of the kind of old carpooling resources that feel really outdated, like these old message boards and stuff. So
Yeah.
that's always changing on how folks actually find each other. That's the trick.
Yeah, the Craigslist for rideshare or all of that. Um, so much of this is about educating fans. So much of this is about educating everybody, but communication. And I'm wondering um, what role artists and headliners can play in that kind of education, or is it better to keep them out of the loop and just let them do their thing, be musicians, and not engage them on these kinds of issues? I'll just let anybody who wants to jump on that one.
It's a very live topic, this one, because I mean, as a part of a promoting company, a lot of the time the kind of onus gets put on to us to try and put that message out there, especially when we're producing a festival or whatever. Um, I think it's difficult sometimes for a large corporate business to finger wag at people and tell them how they should be acting or what they should be doing, unless you start creating a brand which already does really amazing stuff in that space, and then it kind of invites that conversation a bit more. So at the moment, I would say actually, if we can bring artists into that and get them to have that conversation alongside the festival they're playing at, that I feel would have the most significant impact in those conversations, because those artists already have such a tight relationship with their fans. And I think it is a delicate conversation to have, and ultimately it's very dependent on the type of artist. If the artist is well known for private jetting all around the world, that conversation is obviously not going to be met particularly well, I wouldn't say. But equally, if a large festival with no eco credentials whatsoever starts telling people that they should not eat that burger or they should recycle that can, then equally that's probably going to go down just as badly. So it is about having the right conversation in the right way at the right time. And I would say how we approach kind of that conversation with fans is lots of little micro moments across the journey, whether that be, educating fans on the carbon footprint of their meal by a little tag that we put on all of our menus across the site, or in the booking process, saying that the sustainability fee that we're charging them, which is 80p, telling them what that's used for example, and why it's used for that. A little page on the website telling people how they can engage and what they can do to improve their footprint. It's lots of little touch points, things on screens that we have around the festival, etc. So, yeah, it comes from every different angle, but I would say ultimately it has to be done on a kind of holistic partnership level, festival, artist, fan, all working together in the same
Yeah.
way.
Steve Zale, what have you found about working with artists to communicate sustainability?
Yeah, I mean, we started this so long ago that the artists were kind of the last the last level, in that we also respected the artists get to come, they get to say what they want on stage, do what they, make their art. And it became apparent that, wait, they're the messengers from the stage, right? And so we're asking our festivarians to do all these things and incentivizing and mandating, and then the artists get to show up with a plastic water bottle, and so we decided, we had some information that went, to their people in their packets for a while. And then we were like, why don't we give every artist on stage a really nice reusable water bottle they can take home? And so that became our way to kind of get around that issue, where they could be basically playing the same game and sending the message from stage to our people who are already there trying to do their best, and kind of as part of the culture. And over time, I mean, the artists got hip to it, and a lot of them became, started spearheading some of this green touring and the whole thing. But the funny anecdote was, somebody would be like, oh, I'm going to bring my wife, and they're like, you know what, if you go on stage with that, you'll be the only artist in the pictures with a plastic water bottle at our festival. And generally they'd be like, yeah, give me the reusable, and unless you're Robert Plant, and Robert wants to make sure he has a closed lid on his water bottle, we get it. But for the most part, I mean, it became a fun joke that was like, oh, I think you need to drink out of these, and certainly, and then you see him bring them back, and the artists are now pretty hip to what we do, and they're team players, and they get it. And I think the whole culture of the festival just supports now kind of what's going on, and so it's been a lot easier over the years.
Let the record show that this is the first time that I and probably several others have heard the word festivarians, and not just because I love it, not just because it sounds vaguely Rasta, but it's just a great term. Zale, how about you and engaging with artists?
I think Steve said, like, the actual experiencing the system. So like I was telling you, we have these cups. I don't know if you can see this, and we have these are our kind of plates. This is a bamboo composite. This is a steel. We usually have a little silicon ring. You see these all over the United States now. They're very common. And these artists take these home. They take them on tour. They take them to other festivals. They talk about them. The people have them everywhere. And we find that just kind of, that combined with artists, more kind of artist friendly. A lot of artists just kind of come to the festival all weekend. And when you have a giant field, 10,000 people leave, and there's nothing on the ground except for blankets. There's literally nothing because there's no trash at all. And I think those experiences just like really feel very simple, and they don't feel like you're stressing them out. We've found, yeah, we that those are kind of the ways I think artists become the tip of the spear.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're getting down to it here, and we just have I wanted to get one more question in here. Um, what's a sacred cow of festival culture? Food, travel, staging, waste, or anything else that's really become a tough nut to crack, a big challenge that we need to figure out not just how to change it, but not just how to change the technology or the habits, but how to change the culture. What's one of your big challenges? Anyone
I
want to start? Yeah,
I
go
I
ahead.
feel that weirdly transport will be easier to crack than the food system. And I think people are very emotionally attached to their eating habits and their food, and that system is very, very complicated and very, very hard to fix. We can go fully vegan, for example, but our type of festival that we produce, which are kind of big commercial festivals, I can imagine we will get some significant blowback from that kind of stuff. Whereas I can see a world not too far away, in Europe anyway, where we will be moving to electric vehicles quite quickly, and that problem will go away. But even once that's done, I still feel we will have a problem with meat and
Yeah.
dairy.
Yep. Great. Steve or Dale?
Side note on the cow, as they say, I was just talking with somebody at a conference, and they were saying something about, cows that are finished with grain are really the primary producers of methane. And if they're grass-fed cows, that actually there is very little impact. And I was like, oh, is there really a way forward for meat? Because I do agree with Sam. I mean, the meatless festival is an obvious way to really reduce, some of the impacts. But that was like, wow, I need to I don't know if anybody else has heard that, but maybe do some more research on that. Transportation, obviously, I mean, I would do interviews, and the first question, if you're so concerned about the impacts, why even have a festival, right? And that's kind of why I bring up, like, what is a festival, because I think a festival can be such a powerful tool for changing behavior and culture and all the big things that we're dealing with. But it's kind of one of those questions, if you're going to have people travel so far and pollute to get to your event, what's the trade-off? Is it worth it? And so meat and I think transportation are just both huge issues for us.
Zale, you get the last word. Just got a minute or so. Not hearing you, Zale.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, now. Go ahead.
I think they covered environmental meat for us is a little easier in Oregon because we do have grass-fed beef out in Oregon, and we work with kind of the Oregon, country beef out here and source all of our meat through them with our vendors. And so, but the one I would say is we run a kind of community-based festival and like really feel strongly about the kind of impact and how we, what kind of footprint are we leaving for this community? We're not like a traveling show. We're not just like a pop-up thing. We have a kind of an all year round kind of program. That's the hardest thing in America because there's just not a subsidies in this United States, right? So you have to kind of think about running it like a business commercially, which is a much more straight ahead, festival model. So no, there's no issues with that. But when you run something that has this kind of community focus, which is something I find very satisfying, I think that's the biggest challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. Meat, travel, community engagement. By the way, you got to love that the Sacred Cow Festivals is actually the sacred cow. So, well, first of all, thank you to all three of you, Sam, Steve, and Zale, for a great conversation. Thanks to our great audience for a lot of good comments and questions. We didn't get to all of them, but a lot of them I think you were looking at. And before I let you go, just want to put on your calendar the Music Sustainability Summit coming up next year on April 14th. It's going to be another great day. This will be our third annual. You'll hear a lot more about that. So please mark your calendar. It's in the middle of LA Climate Week too. So thank you all so much for being a part of this Green Room festival, Green Room webinar, kind of a festival, but not really. Thanks all to everyone again for being a part of this. And for now, on behalf of Music Sustainability Alliance, have a great rest of your day.